Check it out. 2008 Yamaha FZ1. I bought at the Copart online auction. When the hammer dropped, my $975 bid was the winner, and I was stoked. Now, if you've ever won anything at Copart before, you know the fees stack up quick. And when the dust settled on this one, I owe those bad boys $1,300 buckaroos. Now, keep in mind, I know nothing about this bike. Bought it sight unseen on a complete whim. I never owned a sport bike before and thought this would be a super fun project. According to the online auction, the primary damage was front end. But when I got the bike home, I realized the front end looked really good and there was really no damage at all. Very suspicious. As I looked over the bike, I realized the auction sticker on the windscreen told a slightly different story. It said the bike's primary damage was mechanical. Now, that could be good, that could be bad. Good because it confirms there really isn't any damage to the front end. Bad because, well, obviously we could have a blown motor. But I thought to myself, what the hell, let's go full send on this bad boy. And when the bike was even still on the trailer, I turned the key, hit the switch, and this monster jumped to life. It actually startled me. It was so loud because the previous owner decided to pull the muffler off before it went to auction. But all in all, great news. The bike runs surprisingly well, actually, for having over 50,000 miles. What the heck's going on if they totaled this thing with no mechanical issues, and there's really no heavy damage anywhere on the bike, actually? So what is going on here? So after I got the bike cleaned up a little, I started tearing apart this thing to try to unpack this mystery. Then I saw the main engine mounts look to be busted off inside the frame. So I guess maybe the previous owner had sliders on or something and laid the bike down and they broke off and the bolts were stuck in the engine, or I don't know if that'd be enough to total the bike. Still doesn't make a lot of sense, but regardless, I got to replace those bolts. Like most projects I dive into head first, I have zero experience with these bikes, and everything I'm going to be doing here is a lessons learned for me. Well, lesson number one didn't take long. It came when I was extracting the busted bolts. The left side was fairly straightforward, but the right side was a little different story. What I didn't realize was there is a spacer between the frame and the engine that threads into the engine, with the mounting bolt threading into that spacer. When I was drilling out the busted bolt, I damaged the threads on that spacer and had to replace it. If you've watched this channel before, you know that creating more damage is kind of my specialty. At any rate, I got a new spacer relatively quickly when I was able to jack that engine back into place and get it all bolted together real nice. Now, remember when I said creating more damage was my specialty? Well, here's another example. When I was loosening up that main engine mount bolt, I broke it, so I had to replace that too. All right, with the engine in, it's time to address the busted throttle cable, busted throttle housing, and toss some new grips on this beat up FZ1. This job was pretty straightforward, and you'll be happy to know I didn't even break anything else. I just had to pop the throttle body off real quick to reconnect the push side of the push-pull throttle cable. I also tossed a new air filter in while this thing was open and buttoned everything else up. Tossed the tank on, connected the fuel lines, and we are good to go. Next up, polishing those old headers. I've never done this before, so I thought it would be a cool time to try a few different products and methods to see what works best. So I first tried this Never Dull stuff, and I'm not sure what this product is exactly designed to do, but it really didn't accomplish what I wanted. And the cottonish material it came with wasn't really doing the job, so I tried a little more aggressively abrasive pad, which did work a little better, but it still didn't achieve the results I wanted. So it's time to take it up a notch, and I used the white diamond metal polish, which ultimately did work much better, but being as impatient as I am, I decided to get some power tools involved, of course. And I know you can potentially leave permanent marks in the metal if you're not careful with the direction in which you are polishing, but I thought it was worth the risk, and as it turned out, everything was just fine. Pipes are looking good, and it's time to put on the new muffler. Now, I chose to go with a cheap knockoff brand muffler from eBay. It came with a muffler and a mid-pipe, but the problem with these universal parts from eBay or Amazon is sometimes they require some modification. So I had to give the mid-pipe a little trim job and to get the mounting points a little closer, and I used a little grinder and a little mini drum sander thing here to clean up the burrs. And even with that killer trim job, I had to make a new bracket to drop the muffler a little bit lower than the universal mounting hardware would allow. It was still a little close to the passenger foot peg, and the muffler was rubbing on that foot peg bolt. So luckily I had some scrap metal from some kind of shipping framing something or other I had laying around, so I just cut a little piece out, ground it down, tossed a little paint on it, and it worked really well. And even though that was a knockoff eBay muffler, it still made the bike sound pretty mean. Now, even though the radiator wasn't leaking, I decided to replace it because it was kind of all bent up. The bike was probably dropped a few times or something. And when the radiator covers on either side of the radiator were bolted on, they looked all twisted and mangled, and they looked just really bad. So I decided to toss a new radiator on. You know, these 1000cc bikes can crank out some serious heat, and I didn't want to leave a radiator on there that could potentially fail. Better just replace it. I actually had to buy a few radiators. The first one I got didn't fit as promised, so I bought a second one, and that one I was easily able to swap the pieces from the old to the new and toss it back on. Filled up the radiator and the reservoir with fluid, replaced some bad fuses that control the cooling fans, and just like that, the cooling system was working perfectly. Now, when I was messing around with those fuses, I noticed some wires had been cut and repaired in kind of an ugly fashion. They looked corroded and not good at all. So I cut them again, soldered them up, and made sure we had a clean connection. Now, at the time, I had no idea why these would have been cut, but I found out later. Stick around to the end of the video and I'll fill you in on why these were cut. And as long as you're watching and hopefully enjoying this video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. Next thing up, I need to address the big dents in the gas tank. Never done any kind of body work before, so this is a learning opportunity for me for sure. But you know, that's exactly what I preach on this channel. Get into the garage, learn a new skill, and have fun trying it. So I watched a million videos about Bondo, glazing putty, priming, painting, the whole process. Learned a lot. You know, the Bondo and glazing went pretty smoothly, pretty straightforward process. Priming as well. And look, I know I should have taken the tank off the bike to accomplish all of this, but I didn't, and I'm sorry. Again, another lesson learned. Now, when I was doing the work, I also decided to paint the front cover that sits on the tank. Although I bought an OEM matched paint, I thought it would be a good idea to have the tank and the cover match exactly, since they are touching. And just in case that paint I bought didn't match 100%, it would still be really nice to have those two pieces match. And since they don't touch any other painted part, as long as it was close, it would look really good. And after I tossed the clear coat on, it actually turned out really, really nice. The big lesson I learned though is with the clear coat. A few months down the road, I noticed the clear coat looked like it had some cracking or spider webbing in it. It was very, very strange. I don't know why that happened. I read a few things that maybe I didn't let it dry enough between layers, or maybe I put it on too thick, or the temperature wasn't correct. Who knows? This was winter in Ohio, and you can see that heater in the background I had going. So who knows? It could have been a bunch of different things, but I definitely learned in the future to be a little more careful with the clear coat. Tank's done, and we're on to the rear end. The license plate holder and rear turn signal assembly that was on there was all bent up, and the previous owner had some wonky wiring going on and had a bunch of like LEDs everywhere, and you know, I just decided to get rid of it and replace it all with some universal parts. So I first swapped out the tail light, which I bought a new one with integral turn signals, which really cleans up the rear end and looks really, really slick. And as I said, like a lot of these universal parts, I had to make some small modifications to the license plate bracket. Basically just had to widen the holes a little bit. Adding the license plate lights kind of worked out perfectly as well, with a little modification to the tail end of the bike. The lights fit nicely into the OEM mounting holes just in front of the new license plate bracket, where that big, bulky, outdated OEM tail section would have bolted to. Those holes that were already there house those new license plate lights perfectly. And having all that tucked up under the seat like that really cleaned up the rear end of the bike and made the bike look really, really sharp. Now, when I got the bike, it was missing a little inner rear fender thing, so I bought one to toss on. With the rear end all buttoned up and looking real pretty, it's time to transform the appearance of this standard run-of-the-mill FZ1. Now, Yamaha only released one version of this bike here in the United States, but in Europe they had a few other versions, including a naked Street Fighter version that omitted the front fairing. I really like that look, and since the front fairing that came with this particular bike was all cracked up and scratched and beat up and gross, I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to transform this bike into the Euro version. And luckily you can find these kits online all over the place. It's a super popular conversion that a lot of people do. With that said though, they aren't as bolt-on friendly as I was hoping. There's really no real instructions, which means it's like a lot of trial and error and cutting and grinding and trying again and taking off and putting on and wiring and rewiring over and over and over again. But after a lot of trial and error, it finally came all together and it actually looked really cool. The only issue is I really didn't love the shape of the headlight when I saw it in person on the bike, but oh well. Had I kept the bike long term, I probably would have swapped that front headlight out for a round headlight, one of the standard 7-inch universal headlights. That would have looked really, really good on that bike. So after all the work is done, the final step is to get the bike inspected so I can transfer the title from a total to a rebuild. Now that involves getting an inspection from the State Highway Patrol, and all they really do is verify that none of the parts you're using are from a stolen bike. And this is where I learned why those wires were cut. The officer told me that the engine in the bike was not the original motor. He kind of stood there silently staring at me, waiting for my reaction, and I was thinking like, oh no, this motor's got to be stolen. I don't know what's going on. Am I going to be in some kind of trouble? And then he broke the silence and said, nah, I tracked the motor down from a different bike that was totaled 2 states away. So luckily everything was legit. It passed inspection and it was all good. All in all, this was a really fun project and it turned out pretty darn good. And if you're interested, I have more in-depth videos on the channel that break down each step a little closer. So check that out if you like, and thanks for watching. And as always, peace and love.